Hello, and welcome to the Future of Tourism podcast. My guest today is a founding partner of BCHuges Tourism Consulting in Ontario, Canada. BCHuges has a proven formula for success: offer a unique experience, make people laugh and smile, and make it memorable. It sounds easy. In some sense it is, but it takes research, creative ideas, a crafted delivery, and buy-in from all those involved. And that's where Chris Hughes, Director and Master Experience Creator at BCHuges, really shines. He is a resultant, that special breed of consultant that is committed to helping his clients execute and realize the strategies and plans he has helped them to create. Good morning, Chris. How are you, and what's it like on the ground where you are?
Good morning, David, and thanks so much for having me on this podcast. Really appreciate being here. On the ground in Ontario, Canada right now is definitely unpredictable. There's a lot of the industry is sitting on the edge of their seats, just waiting to figure out what's going to happen, when the emergency order is going to be lifted, when they can open. Restrictions are starting to ease a little bit, but for the most part, in terms of visitor movement and things like cottage rentals and campgrounds and camps and all of those things that make Ontario shine are still not available at this time. So we're doing a lot of calls, a lot of ministerial conversations, just to try and figure out when that exactly can happen. But there is hope. There is definitely hope on the horizon.
Well, and in talking about crisis, Chris, you and your partner founded BCHuges in 2006 after years and years of working hands-on in practical tourism development at the municipal level, building better destinations, essentially. You dealt with a number of crises in that time at the municipal level. There was the Walkerton water supply crisis 2000 and SARS of 2003. What did those events teach you in terms of recovery and the importance of pressing on with destination development, especially in the difficult times?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I don't know if you'd say fortunate or unfortunate to have gone through the first crisis, which was the Walkerton water crisis. And what that taught me, I was the destination manager for the County of Bruce at the time. So very important how that impacted our brand image, and how the focus, the national and international attention was focused on the Walkerton community for some not so great reasons. But what that taught was patience to be able to sort of weather the storm, if you will, ride it out, but at the same time have very solid plans and forecasting done for when you're able to start to move again, when you're able to start to act upon. So it's very similar to with what's happening now. And it also meant that that time we surrounded ourselves with a good team. So we had, provincial advisors around us that were directly plugged into the government, which is really important. But then we also had the industry, and we brought on some good people to help mobilize the industry and listen to them and plan for what that recovery phase looked like. So when the government released its stimulus packages, we were ready, we were prepared, and we were ready. And I think that's sort of the number one lesson that transcends across into today's global pandemic situation that I'm telling the industry is: use this time of pause to get ready, because we know that there will be stimulus, that there will be a new normal. This one's quite a bit different, obviously, but things will change. And the same thing sort of kind of happened during SARS, and because the region that I was managing was north of Toronto, of one of the major urban centers in Canada, and SARS was fairly localized to the city. When that crisis started to ease, our area, because we were only 2 hours out of that region, became inundated with people who wanted to get out of the city for recreation. So we really didn't have to do a lot of thoughtful process to mobilize people to come to our region, because the floodgates literally opened once the travel restrictions were released. So two very different situations. And then this, COVID-19 situation is completely different again, where the entire world is involved in this. And now I'm on the other side, I'm a consultant, and we're listening to a lot of our clients very closely. And again, I'm telling them to get ready. So yeah, three very different situations and lots of experience, I guess, unfortunately, in all of them.
Well, Chris, you brought something back into my consciousness that I haven't thought about in a little while as we deal with the sort of immediacy phase of this crisis. And that is, you and I are big proponents of having shovel-ready plans at all times to address and take advantage of stimulus packages, and whether it's crisis stimulus like this or it's government incentives, which inevitably seem to follow election cycles. Go figure.
Yeah.
And I can't underline enough the prudence of that. The number of times we've been able to take something we've been working on, and because we've gone past the strategy and theory phase into creating actual planning documents and in some cases working construction documents, when those programs come up in the past, you've been able to take real advantage very, very quickly and be some of those projects that get approved at a provincial level. And I think that's really worth reminding ourselves, that having plans that are ready now for execution are supremely important.
100%. And I just did a webinar yesterday where I used sort of one of the rules of, if you fail, or if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. But the main part of that is you've got to be prepared when to drive business back to your especially to your members, your operators, your boots on the ground.
So I'm going to drill into that with you. So when Chris Hughes says be ready with a plan, what does he mean? And let me tell you a story here, because we first met in 2011, and I swear you walked into my office with 2 yellow pages thick research documents that you'd done for RTO4 that were commissioned by my predecessor, and they were pithy documents. They were a few nights of reading each, and I remember looking at you and saying, "This is great. There's a massive amount of intelligence in here, but quite frankly, what would you do with it?" And you said to me, "What if I was running the project?" And I said, "Yeah, what would you do with it?" You say, "Well, in terms of priorities, you have the Grand River, which is one of 19 originally designated heritage Canadian rivers. Its prominence is nowhere near what it should be given the importance of that designation. I would focus the efforts on creating a strategy to bring that asset online in Ontario." And I said, "What would that involve?" And you talked about the multiplicity of stakeholders it would take, and the coordination it would take, the influx of capital from municipalities and from the provincial government. And I looked and said, "So if we do this, I want one assurance. Will you be back here month after month, year after year, to help us lead this project?" And without hesitation, you looked at me and said, "Yes," although I'm sure in your mind you were thinking, "What am I getting into, and who is this madman?"
I still ask myself that question today. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's because I've worked on multiple sides of the industry. So I've been, I was an operator when I worked for conservation authorities running adventure tours. I was a DMO manager, and now I'm on the other side, on the dark side. And, I do have a small little, cottage rental business on the side as well. But what I like to do is, when I build a plan, I like to see it through. And that's in the product development world of tourism. That's every single DMO manager watching this will say, "Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so much easier to do ad campaigns than it is to build out trail systems, or, build a new touring route, or, whatever the case may be." That's where the hard work happens, because you got to mobilize a lot of people on the ground. And with the Grand River, what are we talking? We're talking over 100 different stakeholders, and it's been a lot of years already, and it's going to be a lot of years yet until all the sites along that 200-mile river are going to be living up to their standard of a World Heritage River. So I stick with it. It's not sometimes the most glamorous work, but it's very rewarding knowing that I'm able to make leave a dent on the ground of an experience, of a product that's way better than I found it. And I just want to share with you what got me into this world of tourism product experience development. was a guy by the name of Paul Sampson, who worked for the ministry, and he taught me when I was at the DMO level. But I started looking at my assets, in the county, and one of our major attractions in our region is a place called Sauble Beach, and it's like a mini Daytona Beach of the north. It's where people go, urban residents go to the beach, 7 miles of uninterrupted sand beach, beautiful location. I started to look at the asset and go, it's not really performing the way it should, because there's only 32 washroom units for 7 miles of beach. Where are people going to the bathroom? And the joke was, well, they go, the lake that it's beside is called Lake Huron. And the joke became, it became Lake Urine. And I became driven to work with the municipality to improve the visitor experience for simply using the washroom on a beach level, and it was that's where I kind of got my start, was in that.
Well, and we talk about in tourism all the time, there's digital hygiene, there's physical hygiene. Even on the Grand River project, you started with a really manageable centerpiece, which was, why don't we develop an access standards for the entire river, and that we can go down municipality by municipality, picking off the opportunities. And I'm really pleased to say, I mean, we've been at this, almost 7 years since we actually launched the Access Standards Manual. There are 5 municipalities building 6 sites, and the land contributions they've made are in the millions of dollars, and they all see it as a great opportunity to work hand in glove with tourism to develop assets that don't just drive visitation, but also benefit local stakeholders.
Absolutely. And that's the main part of that project, is that there's so many people involved. There's so many levels of municipal officials involved. There's, and ultimately there's the river users themselves, which we have to be focused on, that's why we're doing it. We're trying to increase the experience that they're having, which hopefully increases the yield, which brings the types of customers to that river that, spend the quality money and have an impact on the municipalities. So it's a long-term effort that 100% will pay off. It's just a matter of, wrangling all the horses in the field to get them rolling.
Well, and I get to audit that program from time to time. And I think one of the really interesting mile markers for me was, you've had stakeholders at the table, the provincial government, the regional tourism office, the Grand River Conservation Area, the municipalities. But it was very interesting when you launched the mile marker project, that the head of the provincial police and the head of the provincial fire marshal's office stepped up and said, we need to be part of this program. This is a template for how we do leisure access, not just water trails, but land trails as well. I thought that was a really big turning point in this.
Oh man, that was that's where it showed the forces of tourism coming to play. Where you have the fire chief, you have the a high-ranking police official sitting at the table. You've got search and rescue. You've got that's where we take the assets for granted and say, oh, just go canoe the river, but you don't realize all the people who are the managers of that asset. And yeah, that was a real sort of eye-opening moment. And the neat thing about that was to see their level of engagement. It's like, yeah, sure, they were there from a search and rescue perspective, but they also wanted to ensure that visitors had a great time, that they weren't getting lost, that they were having a seamless experience. And I think that was really fun to see, again, how the tourism industry connected, those multiple spheres of interest.
Well, and I look at the Grand River project, especially in this time of the COVID-19 illness, and it's obvious that it too will be one of those assets that very quickly can come back online. It's super suited to social distancing. You've worked on a number of projects around the province, and many of them are ongoing. I think of the motorcycle touring routes work that you've done, another activity that can come back online that fits really well inside social distancing. You're hard at work in product development, and sometimes it's hard to make a case for why that needs to happen now, especially when people are looking at scarce dollars. Now, you and I share a philosophy that tourism development money comes back in social marketing once the asset's done. But talk to me right now about working with your clients and why and how they're still committed to product development at a time when most of the rest of the work they're doing has to be, shifted, changed, or particularly curtailed.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the easiest sort of path, and I don't want to say easy in the light of to downplay marketing creativity, but the easiest thing is to lob out messages in times like this, of comeback, and that of course needs to happen. But in the my whole mantra, and you referenced it, is with the power of social media, you create and work with your operators, work with your businesses to make a really creative, unique, one of a kind experience that does all the lifting for you. And we've seen it many, many times. There's one out right now that I wasn't obviously involved with in Finland, which called the Dinner for One, where they set the table in the middle of a field and they have the picnic basket hanging on the rope line, and they slide it to you and you sit there by yourself and you eat. That got international attention. Whether or not that is a sustainable experience that's making money, who cares? But that got the marketing lift. And other projects that we've worked on where that's happened was, we brought, in conjunction with our provincial colleagues in Saskatchewan working on product development there, we brought goat yoga years ago, when it was just emerging in the US. We brought it to a ranch in Saskatchewan with the business that was really excited to do it, and they got national media attention for those sassy images of goats standing on your back, and putting droppings on your yoga mat and all those things that people like to pay for, right? So I've seen it many times. You referenced motorcycle. It's the same thing. Give riders really great reasons to go to a place, and take photos and share memories with their friends, and those all get posted on social media. Everybody knows that. But it is the hard work that as consultants, we seem to have to work really hard to justify to our clients and get access to product development money, to build out those assets. Because the easiest path still in tourism is to take dollars, whether it's member dollars or recovery dollars, and spin it into advertising real quick. We just always want to advocate for, let's invest in those experiences, and let's have the social internets do their magic for you.
So, and then let's talk a bit about the motorcycle touring route work that you've done a number of places in the province of Ontario, for sure. The tip of the iceberg, the bit we see, is the incredible route, the open road, and the maps, and the serviceability of this, and the bike friendly outfitters and restaurants. But getting to that is a really structured process, and the river followed a very similar process. But talk to us about what we don't see in the bit above the surface in motorcycle touring. How do you even start working on motorcycle touring routes, knowing all of the factors that have to be in place before it's successful?
Yeah, and sort of our just in quick terms, our process is, we inventory the asset. So in terms of motorcycle, we had a hunch that this area of Ontario was favorable for riders, but we actually had to get on the ground. I'm a rider, so I'm a little biased. We got on the ground and we inventoried all the roads, and we did it virtually first, and then we back checked it by getting on the roads, and we went, you know what? Well, actually, it blew our minds. We were like, holy shit, this is an incredible place to ride, motorcycles. We need to tell this story. So then we work with the operators. We simply just don't then make a map with lines on it and say, come ride here. We work with all the businesses who want to be part of the motorcycle touring route to become motorcycle market ready, which means things like having covered storage, having a towel or rag to wipe off your bike, having a wash station, having a place to hang up your gear. There's a whole series of things that are really easy for businesses to do. We get them trained, we get them energized. Then we develop the story, we develop the brand story. So we just don't say, oh, come ride our twisty roads, because everybody has twisty roads. So we develop the brand story. For this project in particular, is called Ride the Highlands. And then we go to market. We create the collateral, we create the website, trip planning tools, print maps. Believe it or not, motorcyclists still love print maps because they spread them out at the end of the day, and while they're drinking a beer, contemplating the next day's ride, they work. And then we go to market and we sell it. We bring in influencers, they validate it for us and tell the stories, and we do, our paid buys are with respect to boosting and pushing on social and bringing in influencers and stuff like that. But the product really starts to virally spread on its own, and that's, man, oh man, there's no better feeling for a guy like me than to see that happen. And now I see people all over Canada are like, oh, this Highlands place, I got to go ride there. So now we're bringing in riders from the West Coast or the East Coast to come and ride this, what's perceived as flatland Ontario. So I could do a whole show on that project.
Yeah.
But,
so the catalytic role that either Hughes plays or the DMO or the RTO plays, explain to me how that becomes self-sustaining, especially, using an example like the motorcycle routes, because there was a lot of upfront investment, and these are frank conversations. Motorcycle touring success in Northern Ontario didn't take 6 months. It didn't take 12 months. It's probably almost 3 years of work that grew steadily in its traction, but now it's quite self-sustaining. Tell me about that.
yeah, the sustainability aspect, that's an interesting question, Dave. Because some projects, it depends what the ultimate goal is the goal for the DMO to front load it and support it with cash for the development and then back away, like plant the seed and then back away? Or is it to become a signature experience, signature product of that region DMO, which then requires sustained support? We haven't seen a lot of success with industry supported sustainability models. They're mostly, to this point, the majority of projects we've worked on are still supported by the DMOs, considerably on an annual basis, because of the fact that they haven't wanted to monetize, whether it's through map sales or digital, ad sales or participation fees, things like that, for various reasons. So I guess you have to ask yourself when investing in a product, again, like a canoe route, whether it's a motorcycle touring route, whether it's an art route, what does the 10-year horizon look like for you to support that? And there is no one size fits all model. I know in the US, in Michigan, in Minnesota, there's some different models there, but from a motorcyclist perspective, but they're still not nearly as successful as when the DMO can get behind it and do the right work from the beginning and continue to push it all the way through.
And frankly, in the development of these products, and I'll use the Grand River again as an example, when the DMO and the RTO work so closely on it, it generally becomes a signature experience. We're working on it because it is a unique asset that's particular to the DNA of that region, which makes it all that more covetable in the tourism space.
Yeah.
And I will add to that while we've invested for almost 7 years in the development program for the Grand River, and the first 3 years of that being planning, the amount of money being spent on it now by municipalities to become part of it is many, many times more than we've invested.
Yeah, for sure. And that's again, that's one of those successful situations. But just to tell everybody again, it doesn't happen overnight. It took a lot of 6 years of in the trenches of convincing people that this was the right idea, and now we're getting those high levels of municipal investment as infrastructure investment. It takes a lot of time.
Well, I had a great conversation the other day with Lauren Gold, the CEO at Raleigh, North Carolina. And he talked about an initiative they started in esports, and it's going really well now. It's a tech oriented area. They have gaming development companies and they've invested steadily for the last 2 or 3 years in this. And the interesting question I asked him was, where did you start though? I mean, when you have this idea, you find out that you've got a potentially dominant position in esports, given the nature of your destination, the schools, the tech surrounding it. But what do you do next? And interestingly enough, they're doing things there very much like what I've seen go on with you in Ontario. And they're using things like either Destination Next or Tourism Cafe as a gathering point to bring stakeholders together to identify a vision and then move and inspire them to work on that vision. I've seen you do that many times. Um, Talk about the stakeholder engagement piece on this and how critically important it is, because I can tell you, as the person who shepherded the Grand River program at the RTO, it wasn't going to happen unless all 100 of those people did get to the table. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, and you know me, that I'm a relationship guy. That I always remember one thing that you told me, that you're gonna build success one lunch at a time. So you gotta take people out to a lot of lunches
Chris, that was funny until sometime in
until you got
2000.
audited.
No, 2014, when I weighed 260 pounds.
But
And then I knocked it. Go ahead.
in terms of stakeholders, you have to, as a DMO, and as we have all these webinars and Zooms and high level calls, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that have the backs of the industry. But really, we really have to distill it down to, what is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to put cash in a small operator, or into an operator's pocket of whatever scale. And we have to involve, when we're talking about stakeholders, we have to involve all of those people that are going to understand that end game. And especially, we got to involve those people whose businesses we're trying to stimulate, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And on a project, I make sure that I establish relationships with those people who are going to directly benefit from the project, for a couple of reasons. And the first one is because they're going to become huge advocates in your corner to keep the project going. So if we have a private operator calling the DMO manager saying, "Oh my God, this is the best idea we've ever seen come through. We stand to generate 15% of off-season business because of this project." Boom, that is a huge boost to a project. And the second point in there is, it's personal. As I want to see them succeed, and I know we all do in this industry, as the managers, as the developers. But there's nothing better than hearing those stories that $800,000 project has now contributed to a small business owner being able to hire an extra staff person to deal with the increased demand. Like, those are the results that we're always working for. So we have to bring them in. This isn't rocket science. We have to bring them in right from the beginning and hopefully see it through.
Well, Chris, I think it's rather funny that we interviewed you today in a workshop. I think it's a perfect context for how you go about being, again, what I call a resultant.
Yeah.
You've got a number of projects that you're still in the midst of, even in the middle of this crisis. Your clients see them as valuable, and they actually see them as projects that will future-proof their exposure in the long run by creating assets that are sustainable. Can you talk about some of the projects you're currently working on? Just give us an idea what's going on there.
Yeah, 100%. We're really excited to be working with Parks Canada on a lot of experience development projects. So our national park system, we know, especially, and we just had a call, with regards to, as soon as things start to lift, the first place people are going to go is to parks and public spaces. So we got to be ready for that. But there's Parks Canada is doing some really innovative visitor experience projects across the country, and we're happy to be part of that. Working with some downtown revitalization projects, which is, I tell you, we kicked off a downtown project just before COVID-19 hit, and we had to do a complete 180 with regards to what the focus was going to be, about that project. So that's fun. We're still doing a lot of motorsports work within Ontario, a big snowmobile project called World's Best Snowmobile Destination, which covers a big chunk of Northern Ontario, where they get snow from November till April. So that one's fun, always in July when you're working on snowmobile. We're still engaged in motorcycle route development. Yeah, we've got, if it wasn't for development work in this industry, we'd be playing a lot of solitaire right now. But we're busy. Like, and our clients are doubling down, and they know that this is the time, that during this pause, to hit the gas. So we're very, very, very grateful for that.
So as you plan on that, and in particular as you look at Northern Ontario with much less dense populations, they're going to be hit just as hard. They're going to see sometimes what really is 30% of their normal attendance and occupancy. How did your programs are really well suited to distancing, but how does an operator begin to pivot? And restaurants are the ones that always come to mind, where restaurants were built on a yield per square foot. How do they shift? How is it viable at 30%? Are you having those discussions with your destination partners as to how they're going to deal with their stakeholders in those fronts?
Yeah, and just on your Northern Ontario piece there, like we have operators in this province who are from the U.S., so that own lodges in northern remote high-end lodges in Northern Ontario that can't even get access to their lodges. So when you say a 30% reduction, I think the longer the clock ticks with remote operators, their season is being chopped. Especially again, if you're a northern owner and you can't, or a U.S. owner and you can't even get to your property, that's going to set you back even when things do start to open. But yeah, we're telling people to, and you use the word pivot. I like to use the word swivel. I've just kind of reinvented that word the other day because I'm getting tired of the word pivot. But
Got it.
if we swivel, we mentioned restaurants. I just read something today where in Europe they're keeping streets closed, where they're allowing restaurants to set up outside where social distancing practices can happen more often or be better, suited than inside. So shifting, there's going to be some fundamental business shifts to recapture some of that business. We've seen it with takeout, and any restaurant will tell you that there's no way that they're matching their same, amount of revenue because of their takeout offerings, but they're still able to keep alive. But yeah, I don't get too much into the game of making projections for our clients at this point. It's just I'm telling them to be prepared and get ready for when the new normal when the new normal happens.
Well, and the good news is, though, that doesn't mean that work's not going on at the stakeholder level. I saw some great
Yeah.
work this morning with a restaurant, and actually, the fellow, James Eddington in Exeter,
Yeah.
who's basically taken his whole property and is making a proposal to the government saying, look, if I take my whole property square footage and move my tables out under tents, I can achieve the same gross numbers, but I'll have to use up my entire property, which means you have to license it from the curb to the back door.
Right.
Um, and that's
And
actually
you're
not.
going to see a lot of that flexibility happening, especially from the municipal world, from planning regulations. I know, the government organizations that we work with are going to take a real business first approach. And especially in Ontario, we've seen it with the loosening of liquor regulations, and even with cannabis, legalized here. You're going to see them take a really smart, proactive approach to situations like Eddington's, for sure.
Sure. And then just close out today, let's talk a bit about stakeholder engagement. There is a significant school of thought in this crisis that right now destinations that have purpose-built stakeholder networks that have done more to engage with their local stakeholders and with their locals are doing better than destinations that haven't. Real product development, real destination development, it's all about stakeholder engagement. You have a network of peers out there that you've built up around these projects. How's that playing out?
Well, I think from my perspective, we're working a lot more closely with industry colleagues. But in terms of DMOs, I think on one of your previous podcasts, you talked about how this is the time for the DMO they have to reinvent themselves. If they don't have that robust stakeholder piece, engagement, ready to push play, email, whatever the communication method is, if they don't have that, you're almost irrelevant. So you have to be representing your business community at a really, really intimate level. And if you're not, you can only regurgitate communications coming from federal and provincial levels in your e-blast so many times before people are like, you're not giving me any value. So you better come up with some pretty harsh programs. If you don't have the budget for it, align yourself with those stakeholders that do, and get some things in the works.
Very good. Last messages to your peers in the industry, to destinations, to travelers, anything that's on your mind that we should all be thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? We have to be, we're on pause, and we have to be patient with what's happening. And I know people are quickly becoming antsy because the season's happening, and that's the whole timing of this whole pandemic situation. But we really have to be patient to have the best interests of our world health in mind, first and foremost. And then I'm confident that we'll see those smart people who've swiveled and who've made those movements. They're gonna come back. And what hurts us temporarily makes us stronger in the long run. So those are my those are my philosophical words. You're way better at stringing the words together than I am, David. So
You're great, Chris. It's been a
yeah.
real pleasure to have you on the show today. I do look forward to the next time we meet in person, and I hope it's on a road somewhere, or on a trail somewhere for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here today, and best to you and your family. Stay safe, and keep doing your good work.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate you asking me to be on the show. Thanks.